Bad stuff happens to everybody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The way you respond to adversity is going to define your life. Notice I didn't say might.
Yeah,
It will.
it will.
It will. And the third thing, and maybe most important, is about this thing called forgiveness.
Mm.
Because it was easy for me to forgive the guys at the party because this was Kevin's choice. This was his decision. And it's easy for you to forgive your kid, right? That's what comes.
Yeah.
But there's one person that was pretty hard to forgive, and that was me. It took 1,400 miles and 5 pairs of shoes, but I have found a way to forgive myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard a pastor describe it best. He said that anger and vengeance lead to one thing: destruction. Forgiveness leads to healing. And I would add, sometimes the most important person you need to forgive is yourself.
This is Uncommonly Remarkable. We have surprisingly casual discussions about the lives and notable accomplishments of community leaders, entrepreneurs, and everyday folks like you and me. Think of this podcast as an opportunity to learn something new and to pick up on an entrepreneurial tip or two through open conversation. I'm Artis Beatty. I'm a doctor of optometry and the chief medical officer for My Eye Doctor OD. Though we will inevitably touch on topics within my area of expertise, the opinions and conversations held here are separate from my work with My Eye Doctor. Welcome to the show. Barry, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to have you on the show, not just because the story is so inspirational, because I think there's a message that people need to get. And it's not often I get to sit and talk with someone who's done some of the things that you've done for the reasons that you've done them. And I am really excited for you to talk to us a little bit about all the goings on and ultimately your son and what brings us full circle here today. So
Yeah.
welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me on, Artis. I really appreciate it.
You know, I as I was learning a little bit about you, there's so many small pieces. I mean, the fact that you became an author, you walked a very long way. You've been delivering a message to young people, specifically students, over the course of a very long time now, and it all began in honor of your son, Kevin. So, can you talk a little bit for us about Kevin?
So Kevin he was involved in the FFA. So he was raising pigs and riding mules and cowboy hats and belt buckles and driving old pickups and all of that kind of stuff. That was his high school. He was not a good student, and I tell everybody this. He was a lot like me. He was not a very good student, right? And he struggled mightily with it. That was just the process. He was actually flunking his English class in March of his senior year in high school, and I would talk to him about it. You know what he would say? Yeah, Dad, don't worry about it. And of course, I called the school anyway and talked to the teacher and all those questions. Was he there? Because one of his problems was he would do an assignment and never turn it in. Just the strangest thing.
That is the strangest thing.
And the teacher actually knew what to motivate him, so she would go back into class and report back to him in front of all of his buddies that his daddy called to check on him. And then I get the phone call, right? You knock it off. Stop calling my teachers. And I'm like, look, dude, this is the only class you're even close on. Just take care of it. And he
Yeah.
did get his grades up, and he did graduate. And I remember at the high school graduation ceremony, he gave me a hug and whispered, "Thanks for not giving up on me, Dad."
Oh, wow. Wow. And that speaks to the kind of person he really was, right?
Yeah.
Because I've heard you talk a little bit about his personality and the fact that he was very giving and helpful for people.
Yeah. Yeah. He befriended David was his name. He was in third grade. He was in a wheelchair. And nothing wrong with David, right? Except his legs didn't work. And because his legs didn't work, it made it harder for him to make friends. But Kevin was the one that made sure that David got every place he needed to get.
That's amazing. And those types of things matter so much, because it usually it takes one person who is ultimately kind to really get people to understand that others aren't so different, right?
Yeah,
And it's a very special person that can actually be that one. So that's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
So, so Kevin graduated, and he was deciding, he was deciding kind of what he was going to do, with life, and that's where this story really starts to take fold, right? So my understanding is that he was preparing to go out and be on his own.
He was. So basically, what happened was he graduated from high school. He got a job working for an electrician, making good money. And this is it's just crazy because he wanted me to co-sign a loan because he wanted to buy a new truck.
Hmm.
And I agreed to co-sign that loan, but I made him give me 3 months worth of insurance payments and car payments, right? Because I didn't want to be on the hook for this, right? This is your deal, not mine. And I was hoping he'd find a truck from a private party because I really didn't want to deal with a dealership, right? 'Cause if he does it at a private party, I go to the credit union, sign papers, and I'm out of there in 5 minutes.
Right.
Go into the dealership because that's where he got it. And I'll never forget sitting down, and the first thing that guy said to me was, "How about some life insurance?" And I'm that guy. I'm that guy who rather indignantly told him that 18-year-old boys don't need life insurance because they don't die.
Mm,
But I was wrong. They do die.
mm,
He wouldn't live long enough to make a single payment on that truck.
unbelievable.
Yeah. A couple weeks later, he started the process of moving out. He threw a bed, a TV, and a dresser in the back of his um, truck. Came back in, and he walked in the living room and he said something I've never forgotten. He said he wasn't going to take his toothbrush with him.
Hmm.
He'd be back tomorrow morning and grab it. And I walked out front with him like I normally do. It was just a thing. Walked out front with him, gave him a hug, told him I loved him and to be careful, and watched him drive away. It was the last time I saw him alive. That night, his friends decided to throw a housewarming party. Started with a keg of beer, moved on to shots. Um, he left a voicemail for his sister that night talking about how he just did 6 or 7 shots in a row. He was really drunk, having a good time. Everybody's laughing. Shortly after he left that voicemail, he passed out. The people at the party laid him in his bed on his side in case he vomited. The party was still going on. They actually went in and shaved his head and his legs while he was passed out because he's just passed out, right?
Oh man.
But his buddy Craig was worried about him and kept checking on him. Around 4 a.m., calls started coming into 911. First calls were difficulty breathing. Next calls were not breathing. My son died alone in a hospital while I slept peacefully in my bed.
That is unbelievable. And so from alcohol poisoning.
Alcohol poisoning, that's correct. His blood alcohol content was 0.36%,
Oh
which
wow.
is very drunk. It's the only statistic I give people, but I tell them, hey, if somebody's passed out, you don't know how much trouble they're in. You just don't. Uh,
Right.
and people think, I'm not going to take them to the hospital for that. It happens all the time. Somebody's just got to have the guts to do it.
And before this night, before he moved out, had he been a drinker before, or?
You know, that's a good question. I suspected there might have been a couple of times,
Mhm.
but there was nothing obvious. And, people often ask me, did I talk to him about alcohol? I didn't really talk to him about alcohol. We talked about drugs a lot,
Hmm.
but I didn't talk about alcohol because we have an alcoholic in the family, and he always talked about how stupid he was and how he was never going to be like that.
Mm, mm-hmm.
Right? So you kind of, as a parent, you go, well, okay.
Yeah, that because you make the assumption he understands it, that he's giving you
Right.
back what you need back from a feedback perspective. You don't have
Right.
to worry about that.
Yeah.
And and I don't know how much information you have from that night from the people that were there, but what was it that kept them from calling for help or making sure that he got help?
I think they thought it wasn't a problem. There wasn't anything nefarious about it. His buddy Craig was with him. A lot of the people at the party I really didn't know. He moved into a place. It was a 28-year-old, which should have been a clue to me. It was renting out rooms in a house, and there was nothing. It's just one of those things where if you don't know about it, you don't know. Hey, this could be a problem
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we don't know. He said 6 or 7 shots, but I've been told those were probably double shots. And uh, I've heard, obviously, it was a party, two different versions. One of them said it was Jägermeister, and the other one said it was Jack Daniels. Well, I don't know
Mm,
about Jägermeister, but Jack Daniels is a pretty, 12 shots of that is way too
very
much.
stiff. Yeah, yeah. So he went to the hospital eventually. He passed away, but you didn't know. How did you find out?
So the next morning was Sunday morning, right? My wife and I are sitting around drinking coffee, talking about what we're going to do or not do that day. At about 8:30 in the morning, the doorbell rings, and we're looking at each other because we weren't expecting company. And I open the door, and I see two police officers and somebody in plain clothes at my front door. Should have been a big red flag, right? It should have been, but again, I'm that guy. It didn't even occur to me that something bad had happened. I actually
Mm,
joked with them as they came in. They didn't laugh at any of my jokes. One of the officers and the person in plain clothes stayed by the front door. The other officer walked in and stood in front of a brown chair that Kevin had sat in 2 weeks before and talked about how his life was finally beginning. He said there'd been an accident. Your son is dead. We asked who, because we have a number of children.
hmm.
They said it was Kevin, and they handed me his driver's license. There's something pretty final about it when a police officer hands you your child's driver's license, because until that exact moment in time, you're holding out hope.
Mm,
This is all a big mistake. You've misspelled the last name. You need to be 3 streets over, yeah, at least next door, right? Any
right.
place but my place. But when they hand you your child's driver's license, you know he's gone and he's never coming back.
That is absolutely unimaginable. Particularly, I mean, when you think about you just saw him the day before, he was off to start something new,
Yep.
and he was coming back to get his toothbrush,
Yep.
and you had no indication that he wouldn't be back until people come and show up at your door.
Yeah. Yeah.
How did you process that in the moment and start to be able to understand what was going on?
You don't. People say they can't imagine, and I agree with that. You don't. Um, I was angry with God, artist.
Mm,
And I told him, and I used some very colorful language to tell him, back up time, you're God, back up time, take me, let him live. And I don't think that's unique for a
mm.
parent to say that. Any parent would say that. A couple days later, I had another life-changing event. And this is hard for me to describe, but I'm going to do my best. I was in bed. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I had this sense that someone had walked in the room. You know how somebody walks in behind you or something?
Mhm. Mhm.
I had this sense that somebody had walked in the room. Then there was a
Mm.
light I'd never seen before and haven't seen since. And there was a message. Kevin didn't suffer, and something very good would come from this.
Oh,
And
wow.
before I could wrap my head around it, it was gone. I
Wow.
didn't, just And I tell everybody, it's not that it made everything better because it didn't, but it did give me a mission that I didn't understand there. And, I tell everybody, I don't know if it's the something very good, right? And I think I'm going to spend the rest of my life chasing that.
And so, as time went on, you obviously had to make arrangements for him. How did you make the decision that you were going to do something as monumental as go on a very long walk from Arizona to Montana?
I like it. So we decided to have him cremated. And I remember going down to the funeral home, and you walk into the funeral home, and they've got nice pictures on the wall, and they're playing music in the background. They take me into an office, sit me down in a big, comfortable chair with a desk in front of me. And the funeral director walks in, sets an urn down in front of me. An urn that holds all the remains of the kid that I burped, changed his diapers. I coached baseball, basketball, soccer, football. I taught him to shoot a gun and swing a golf club. All the remains of him were sitting in front of me. And for whatever reason, at that point, I knew that I didn't want to be a victim because the world doesn't need any more victims. We've got plenty already. The world needs people who take something bad and they make something very good come from it. And I thought about what I would hope somebody else would do if it happened to their kid. And for me, the answer was pretty easy. It was just to get out and tell the story. Not for the money, because I'm here to tell you there is no money in the world that'll fix the hurt. It does not exist. The only thing that helps is to try to make something good come from such a senseless tragedy.
Hmm.
And then we had to decide, what are we going to do with his ashes? I grew up in Kalispell, Montana. It's up in the northwest corner of the state. And Kevin had been there a number of times and always talked about wanting to move there someday and buy a ranch.
Oh,
So the normal thing to do would be to put him in your car and drive there. But I decided to put him in my backpack and walk from Gilbert, Arizona to Kalispell, Montana and tell the story along the way.
wow.
Yeah. The idea for the audience that's a little older, in my mind, obviously it was a God thing, but in my mind, his favorite movie was Lonesome Dove. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I've seen it. It's been a long time.
Yeah. In that movie, that's in my mind in the movie they did it on horseback.
Horses,
I
yeah.
didn't do it that way, but in my mind, that's how I put that together.
Wow. And it's how far is it between Gilbert and
It's a,
Montana?
right about 1,400 miles. I averaged a little over 90 miles a week ish. I had plantar fasciitis, a bad knee, you name it. Blisters, ingrown toenail. I actually had surgery on my toe when I got back because, yeah, ingrown toenail, all of that good stuff. So yeah, there
Oh
was
my goodness.
plenty of that kind of fun stuff to deal with.
But between deciding that you were going to do it and actually setting out, how much time was there?
That took about a year and a half because I had to try to figure out what that looked like,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there was a lot of little things that happened along the way. And there's one little thing, as I thought about whether I was going to, a lot of people tried to talk me out of it, right?
I would
Because
imagine.
hey, maybe you should just go walk a couple weeks and then come back the next year and do it. And I talked to this guy who said something that I thought was a good advice for life. He said, how do you think you'd feel about it in 10 years if you don't do it?
Mm.
And I'm like, that kind of sealed the deal for me. Finding someone, so I ended up, I thought I'd get a shoe sponsor or something, I write letters and do all of that. And it ended up, there's a nonprofit here in town, notmykid.org. I had tried several places and they agreed to do it. They set up the speaking engagements. They came up with a fair amount of money for it um, through a local donor, and they set it all up. I had to commit to think about the logistics around this artist. I had to tell them, okay, when are you going to be in these towns?
Right.
So we can call those schools and get this set up. So
That's
there was a
right.
lot of that. And I knew that I had to walk during the school year. So that's why it was about a year. And I left in February from Gilbert because I needed to, walk during the school year to hit the schools.
And the logistics alone would be daunting, right? Because you've got to if you set up a schedule, you don't get but so much variance to be able to make it to your speaking engagements. Uh,
Yeah, and this predates all of the cool stuff that you have at your disposal now, like GPS and calendars and all of that kind of stuff. And, I had actually, when I scheduled it, I allowed for sick days and weather days.
hmm
Believe it or not, I didn't have a single sick day or weather day. I had days I didn't want to go. Let's be clear about that. I look outside, it's like, oh, it's 40 degrees and raining. And there's days I didn't feel good, but I always thought, well, I might feel worse tomorrow. I better go today.
yeah, yeah.
Right? It's that mindset of I better go.
Did you have a support team? Like, did you, like, because I imagine if you're bicycle riders, for example, they have a pace car and they're just, they kind of keep up with them. What was it like for you?
My one daughter walked part of it, but my main support was my wife.
Mm,
She drove what I call the chase vehicle, so she would meet me. It ended up, it took a while to figure out it's not a race, so I would walk 3 or 4 miles, take a break. She would stop. I would stretch, get something to eat, get some more. I was actually drinking, I think it's called Exceeds instead of Gatorade, but refuel on all of that stuff and then get up and do it again. And, you know, I was asked a while back, did I ever think about quitting?
hmm
And the answer to that is no, I didn't think about quitting, but I wasn't even out of Arizona before I started wondering if I was going to make it. Because Arizona, believe it or not, is not very flat. Gilbert's at 1,300 feet. Flagstaff, where I walk through, is at about 7,400 feet.
Oh, wow.
And there's a lot of
Wow.
up and downs in between
Yeah.
there. And I got to the point where I'm like, man, I don't know, because in my mind, I'm thinking I got 1,200 miles left to go, and I'm tired. But again, I think it was a God thing. I stopped thinking about 1,200 miles, and I started thinking about I'm going to walk 3 more miles and take a break, and I'm going to block out the fact that there's 3 states ahead of me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great metaphor for life, right, artist?
Yeah.
It's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't think, well, that's just too big of a goal. But all these little things you can do, and then next thing you know, you're entering Montana.
And so you had a backpack. Was the urn in the backpack?
Yes. Yeah.
And so did it feel like Kevin was going with you? Like not just physically, but metaphorically too?
Oh, 100%. And you meet, he was definitely, I always tell everybody when I needed it the most, the wind was always at my back.
Hmm.
And you meet a lot of wonderful people. The world's a little bit more jaded now, but people stopped every single day because we had a wrap on the truck that said Kevin's last walk. And every single day, people would stop and talk to us. And if it was raining, about every car that went by would stop and say, hey, you need a ride?
That's I mean that's awesome. I mean, people you kind of underestimate the innate goodness of people, right? Like
Yeah,
everybody's going about their day to day, but underneath it all, most people are genuinely good people, and they don't want to see other people suffer or have a hard time, and they
right.
given the opportunity they will help. But it's so interesting to think you're walking, you've got a chase vehicle, and nobody wants you to be in the rain.
Yeah.
which is
And probably the coolest thing that happened on the walk. Oh, there was a ton of cool things. Let's be clear about that. But I had spoken at Flagstaff High School, and I was just reading in my book. I think I may have actually been north of Page. So I was a few days outside of Flagstaff, and I saw a car go by and put on their brake lights, and I thought, oh, cool. I'll stop, take a break, and talk to this
hmm
guy. And he gets out and he says, "Did you speak at Flagstaff High School?" And I said, "I did." And he gave me a hug, and he said, "Thank you," because for the first time, his son came home and told him about what happened at school today.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
that's huge. That's huge. Because I mean, in growing up, and I grew up in a small town. Like you're you would come home and talk about things kind of that you wanted to talk about if you were going to tell your parents, but it wasn't really something that Oh, how was school? And you go into any detail. Oh, it was fine,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
so it means that there was something that was really, really important to happen if he came home and really talked about school that day.
Yeah. And I've learned through the years, artists, with high school students, um, you have to be genuine with them.
Hmm.
They'll see you right through it. Because I actually addressed that right up front. Because I had a guy years ago, he asked me, "Are you still speaking at schools?" And I said, "I am." And he said, "You shouldn't be doing that. You're too old." And I was kind of offended by it.
What?
Yeah, seriously, this is the way it went. But then I thought about it later and I'm like, you know what? I should probably address that right up front. And so I do. I just tell them, look, I'm just here to tell you a story.
Hmm.
I'm not here to tell you how to live your life. Just relax. I'm just here to tell you a story. And I've had principals say that's the most important thing you said because you can kind of feel everybody's like, oh, okay, he's not preaching to me.
Yeah. They go from who's this guy to, oh, maybe I should listen and see what
Yeah,
he's got to say, huh?
yeah.
And so when you're speaking to students in particular, what's the message like? Because in today's world in particular, there's all kinds of stories, fictional, non-fictional, about things that could happen and things that might happen. And how do you get people to, or the students to really think about themselves and identify with what you're trying to get them to understand?
Good question. Um, so I said that I talk about stories, but
Hmm.
the other thing that I do at the beginning is I tell everybody, look at me for just 1 second, eyes on me. I don't want you to listen here because you guys already know this stuff up here. I want you
Mm,
to listen from your heart. That's where the story comes from, and that's where life change happens.
that's amazing.
It's all God stuff, artist. I'm an old hillbilly. There's no way I got it. Trust me, there is no way. There is no way. And I tell everybody, if God would have told me this is the plan, I said, yeah, why don't you pick somebody else?
Yeah. And really, I was really curious as to whether or not you had written things before, because you decided to write a book around this, and I wondered if you were a writer, if you had done a lot of public speaking, like because it just seems like you're doing like this is a really big thing for someone to do.
It is. And the answer to that is I'm an application engineer by trade.
Mm,
So I'm not, did I have to get up and do a few presentations here and there? Yeah. But Um, absolutely none of that. I had to learn. I watched a lot of people speak. I read a lot of books. The book, so I kept a blog while I was, that's the only thing we could do back then. To be clear, there was no FaceTime Live or any of that cool stuff that you can do now. But I kept a blog. And when I got done with the blog, I called one of my buddies up who had actually come and surprised me on the walk, came and visited me, which was really cool. And I said, hey, I'm going to print out this blog. Do you want a copy of it? And he said, no. I
huh.
said, oh, okay. Well, why not? And he said, because you're going to write a book. And I said, no, I'm not. because I was pretty averse to big projects at that point.
Yeah.
And then a year or two later, I started that process. And I tell everyone, writing a book was harder than walking to Montana for me. Well, if you think about it,
Wow.
when you walk, I get up every morning, I know exactly what I'm going to do. But
Okay, that's
writing a
fair.
book uses all these different parts of your brain that I don't access all the time. I'm a guy, right? I don't access all those things. I had people review it, and this one lady, so I wanted feedback. And by the way, you write a book and you give it to your friends to read, guess what they're going to say? Oh, it's great.
Yeah, they tell you good things, right?
No. So I got a book club to read it and went around the room, and they told me something they liked about it. And then the part I wanted was, okay, I want you to tell me one thing, at least one thing you didn't like about it. And I'll never forget, this one lady said, well, you told me more about your shoe selection than you did about how you felt about it when you finished the walk. But it's that kind of feedback that you need,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because I'm a guy, right? You don't write about feelings. But Stephen King wrote a book on writing, and I tell everybody that the takeaway from that was that he explained it uses different parts of your brain. There's the creative part of your brain, and then there's the logical part that kind of puts things in place. And he said, you don't try to do them both at the same time. And he
Mm.
said when he writes all of his books, he would close the door and just type. Don't worry about where it's going to go or whether you're ever going to use it. Just type. And then later, with your logical part of the brain, you try to figure out, is this usable? Where would it go? That
Mm.
kind of thing. Yeah,
And that makes sense. That makes
yeah,
sense.
it does. Because it's two different parts of your brain.
So, when you finally did make it to Montana and the walk was over, like what did you feel like, or what did you do right? Because you spent so much of your time now on that mission, and the mission was accomplished. Did you
Yeah.
feel at peace because you were done?
I felt at peace, but I also knew that it wasn't over. Because
Mm.
I got asked a lot of times, what's next? And I said, I don't know. And I just kept telling the story every chance I get. And that's what I do podcasts now. And I speak at schools. And, in the beginning, artists, when I did this, I had it all typed out and I read it. When I was on the walk, and you could hear a pin drop in the room, 1,400 kids in the room, you could hear a pin drop. But I had it all typed out and I read it and I rationalized this. You'll like this. Because when Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech, he read it.
Mm.
And I said, so what's wrong with reading it? But I had really good advisors that said, you need to drop kick that. Not my kid. I'll never forget one of the, well, they were called counselors, I think, but they listened to my presentation and she gave me the best advice that I've ever gotten. She said, I don't really care about all that other stuff.
Yeah.
I want to be sitting in the room when you get that knock on the door.
Mm.
Tell me about that knock on the door. I want to walk into the funeral home with you.
Mm.
Tell me about that. And it took years. I'm a happily married man, artist, and my wife sat in on a lot of them, and she gave me great feedback because she would sit in the back, and you can read an audience from the back, right?
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
And she would say, no, you lost him with that. You need to get rid of that or fix it. She was just honest with me. She's like, yeah, you lost him with that. You either fix it or get rid of it. Right. And so through the years, it's evolved a lot.
So, when you look back during the time that you were walking, what did you learn? Um, like we were talking before we started about my goal is to start each day and learn something new that day, and lifelong learning is my thing. So every opportunity we have, particularly when you're doing something like you were doing, there's got to be something that you took away that you wouldn't have gotten had you not done the walk? Do you know what that is?
It's a couple things. One of them is one we already talked about, that there's a lot of wonderful people out there. But what I also learned is through God, anything is possible. I mean,
Mm.
you can, I mean, look at me. I'm like 5'5", 160 pounds. I am not somebody you could think, you know, one of the places I walked in and they're like, "Well, you're not at all like I was expecting." I said, "We were expecting somebody 6'5" with a big beard and long hair to come in and sit down." And I'm like, I I learned that it's incredible what you can do with help from above and when you buy in on it.
It's
But you have to
amazing.
buy in on it 100%. And I was bought in, right? I mean, I was 100% bought in on it.
And when you speak now, and when you were speaking then to students, younger people, what is it that you wanted them to be able to take away from hearing the story?
Three things, three big things, and they're all biblical truths. And the first one's about decision making. The two
Mm.
most important decisions you're ever going to make, apart from following Jesus Christ, are about drugs and alcohol. You know stories, I know stories, we all know stories. You need to educate yourselves about the dangers of drug and alcohol abuse as if your life depends upon it.
Mm.
Because it does.
Does.
It
Yeah.
does. And the second thing's about adversity. Bad stuff happens to everybody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The way you respond to adversity is going to define your life. Notice I didn't say might.
Yeah,
It will.
it will.
It will. And the third thing, and maybe most important, is about this thing called forgiveness.
Mm.
Because it was easy for me to forgive the guys at the party because this was Kevin's choice. This was his decision. And it's easy for you to forgive your kid, right? That's what parents
Yeah.
do. But there's one person that was pretty hard to forgive, and that was me. It took 1,400 miles and 5 pairs of shoes, but I have found a way to forgive myself.
Ah. Mm-hmm.
And I heard a pastor describe it best. He said that anger and vengeance lead to one thing: destruction. Forgiveness leads to healing. And I would add, sometimes the most important person you need to forgive is yourself.
Yeah.
We all make mistakes. It's the way you handle it that matters.
That is so true. And I've had the privilege of being able to speak to some people who have gone through some tremendous adversity. And the common thread is exactly what you described. It's the difference between becoming a victim and deciding, no, I'm not going to be a victim, and handling the adversity in a manner that allows it to build character, build you as a person, and then be able to help other people.
And that's exactly what the Bible teaches us. I think the one I quote, it's James, I think it's chapter 1, where he says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds." And I agree with the verse, but I always think there's no joy in it when it's happening. The joy comes afterwards,
After. Yeah.
right? But um, these things fundamentally change your life, and they can change your life for the good. That's part of the grief process. Um, I've had some discussions about that, and maybe I have a little. This may sound a little terse, but um, one of the things I wanted to do was to feel the way I did before he passed away,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And that's simply not possible. The old you dies with your child.
Hmm.
There's a new you there, and it's up to you to define that new you. But the old you is gone. You will never, and it sounds harsh, right? But it's true.
Mm-hmm.
You're never going to feel that way again.
And you have the opportunity to define who that person is and becomes,
Yes.
and it's all in how you decide to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if people are hearing this story for the first time and they want to know more, where do they go? How do they find out more about you and Kevin and your book?
Um, the best place to go is my Facebook page for that. It's Kevin's Last, on Facebook, it's just Kevin's Last Walk, all one word. All the podcasts are there. The website is kevinslastwalk.com. And there's ways to get a hold of me at both of them. And I tell everybody, here's the thing, artists, it's never about the money for me. If it's in Arizona, I do not charge a dime to go anywhere. If I have to travel, there's travel costs, but that's it. It's just travel costs because I'm not looking to make any money on this.
That's remarkable.
I just want to tell the story. The book's on Amazon. If you type in my name, Barry Adkins, it'll come right up at the top.
Well, I'm going to link all of those things in the description of the episode so people who are doing other things, driving around, don't have to try to pin it down. They can go and click it. But it has been phenomenal just to talk with you. I've been actually looking forward to it for a few weeks. One of the things that I do as I'm learning about a new person that I've never met is I read things. So I've read excerpts from the book. I haven't gotten through the whole thing yet. I listen to other presentations. I read about you from other places. And so it's just really nice to actually get to sit and talk with you. And I really, truly appreciate the time.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. And I tell everybody, if you've got contacts at schools or churches, let's make it happen. I only turned down one or two. There was a lot of them on the walk where they'd come up and say, "Hey, can you speak at my school tomorrow?" I'm like, "Yes." I only turned down one, and it was 600 miles out of the way. So,
oh my goodness,
I'll make it happen. Usually, I can make it happen. Bring me in.
Well, I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thanks for having me on the show, Artis.
Thank you for being here.
If you've made it this far, then I have to thank you for your time. I hope you've learned something new and enjoyed listening to the discussion as much as I enjoyed having it. I'd love to hear from you about the show because we're working really hard to bring you great content and the feedback really helps us get better. If you like what you've heard or watched, for those of you who are streaming out on YouTube, then take a split second to give us a thumbs up or a like. It really helps other people like you find the show too. And no one likes to miss out on the good stuff. So go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't have to wonder when or if there's a new episode. And until next time, stay remarkable.